Good afternoon, Falmouth. I'm Jeff Wyman. We are in FCTV studios here at 310 Dillingham Avenue. I am again here with a legislative update with Representative Dylan Fernandes. Dylan, welcome again to our studio.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
And I think it's been between 4 and 6 months since we've had you here. The legislative session has started up here in this past January. So give me a little bit of what's going on.
Yeah, so just an honor to be elected to a second term to serve my hometown of Falmouth in the legislature. And then as a reminder, I also have 8 other towns in my district, 6 on the Vineyard, the smallest town in the state population-wise, in Gosnold, and then all of Nantucket as well. So it's an honor to represent Falmouth in particular, a place that I grew up in, went to school in, live in, and love. But a lot of changes in the legislature this year. There's a really large new class of legislators that came in. My class, there are 11 of us. This next class, there's 24 new freshmen who've come in.
Wow.
And it's a really exciting class. Like mine, it's really reflective of the diversity of Massachusetts. And so a really diverse class when it comes to race, ethnic background, gender, age, and the like. And so you're seeing more and more, and especially recently, folks get elected who really represent the diversity of the state.
Excellent. Yeah, it seems to be kind of a trend this past election cycle throughout the country.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of the elections, I was curious to hear from you a little bit about the sentiment and the attitude and emotions around this election cycle, because it was the midterms and it was a big deal. So as you were canvassing around and talking to people, what were some of the things they were telling you that they were interested in you taking up as an issue?
Yeah, so there's a lot going on the national level, and people, national politics are on everyone's mind. And I did go up, a friend of mine who was a classmate of mine named Wanda Matias was actually running for Congress up in Lawrence and Lowell area. She ended up losing, unfortunately, but she would have been a terrific advocate. But when I was knocking on those doors, people were really interested and standing up to the Trump administration, as you can imagine. But more locally, when I was knocking on doors for myself here, people are really focused on local issues, and kind of the big ones that my office has been really committed to addressing are around environmental stewardship and addressing climate change and sea level rise and coastal resiliency, around affordable housing, around the opioid and heroin epidemic, and around kind of access to services more generally. This is a district where, I represent 2 islands, so access to service for them is always a struggle, but also Falmouth too. I mean, I often joke that Falmouth is the 3rd island that I represent because on the Cape, we're really isolated from, transportation-wise, from many other areas on the Cape. So, and a lot of the services, right, are in just a town or 2 over, and kind of Hyannis and Barnstable, but those can be really hard to access as well because Falmouth is, we're kind of on our own at the end of the Cape.
Not all roads lead to Falmouth.
Yeah, that's right. Which we like sometimes too. We kind of enjoy our isolation as well. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, you mentioned some things that were going on in the legislature, and one of the topics that you mentioned was environmental issues.
Yeah.
And we were talking before about water quality. In Falmouth, water quality issues here are just exasperated as opposed to other communities because we have so many miles of coastline here compared to a lot of other municipalities in the state. So talk to me a little bit about what's going on up in Boston regarding water quality and specifically to Falmouth.
Sure. Yeah, so there's a lot going on right now, and a lot around coastal resiliency, a lot around the Cape and Islands wastewater and water quality infrastructure. And you're right, Falmouth has more coastline than almost any other municipality in the state, and we have some beautiful estuaries here and bays that we need to protect, ponds, incredible water resources that draw tourists here from all over the country and are really a part of why we love calling Falmouth home. So making sure that our water quality is protected and that we're investing in it has been a priority for me. In the budget last cycle, we got specific funding for Falmouth around water quality, and those funds are being used right now over in West Falmouth for innovative alternative septic systems, because we have a huge issue of the nitrification of our water resources. And so these kind of denitrifying systems will help get the nitrogen, will help prevent nitrogen from seeping into our bays and ponds and estuaries and the like. And so that's a small piece around kind of coming up with innovative solutions for the town of Falmouth to be able to sustain clean water. And that was just one budget amendment, but as part of the Cape delegation, we fought for and secured as part of this kind of room rental tax legislation, or people often call it the Airbnb bill. So the tax on Airbnb rentals. So a small component of that for the state, but a huge component of that for our area, for the Cape and Islands, is that we created the Cape and Islands Water Quality Trust Fund. And when every town that chooses to be a part of it will send 2.75% of room rental, short-term occupancy rental tax dollars into a region-wide water quality trust fund for our local towns to be able to dip into and use that money for clean water projects, whether that's sewering, whether that's these alternative septic systems and the like, whether that's permeable barriers that help reduce nitrogen flowing into our waterways, whether that's aquaculture and using oysters as natural filters to get out to filter and clean the water in our waterways. This is a fund that will raise a lot of money, hopefully $1 billion over the next 50 years. Wow. For water quality projects here on the Cape and Islands. And for folks who don't know, we're actually under a court order from the federal government to clean up our waterways, and we have a $4 billion wastewater infrastructure deficit here on the Cape and Islands. So we have a ton of money that needs to go into cleaning up our waterways, and this 2.75% is a way to fund these projects and a way to fund them from people who come here and visit, right? Because if they're not funding it, then it's going to be on the backs of local property owners here, right, and local taxpayers, and they would have to foot, over $1 billion. And so this was a creative way for us to be able to raise this revenue from the folks that come here, largely in the summertime, and for them to pay, a very small percentage. And these folks, they use our roads, they flush our toilets, they call our police, they call our fire. It's only right that they pay a small percentage back to the local community to sustain what really is our greatest natural resource here on the Cape and Islands in our water quality. Right.
Now, was that a popular concept up at the State House, or was there any arguments against that, or was it mostly just we have to flesh out the details?
Yeah, so this was something that the Cape delegation, which is a bipartisan delegation of Republicans and Democrats from the entire Cape and Islands, we worked on this as a group for over a year, and we really hashed out fine details to make it accessible for every town to join. So among the delegation, this is something that we all supported, and that's really key. Even though we're on different sides of the aisle, we always come together, and we're a really tight-knit group when it comes to helping out the Cape and Islands. And I'll often help out my friends and colleagues, Republican friends and colleagues, and I'm a Democrat. I'll often help out them with the local issues going on in their district, because we want to, there are something like 40 representatives from Boston, right? There's only 8 of us from the Cape and Islands, and it's really important that we stick together as a cohesive group, and we do that, and we work really closely together, and that close work is what enables us to get initiatives like this passed. And this is probably the largest kind of environmental piece of legislation to impact the Cape and Islands in the last several decades. So not something that's actually getting a lot of attention, but something that will be incredibly impactful in the years to come. And then I'd also point out Falmouth, because Falmouth has already made significant water quality investments and water quality infrastructure improvements. Falmouth is actually one of the towns in this fund that is able to use the money to pay off existing debt. Because we wanted to make sure that towns that have already been proactive around addressing water quality are able to use that money for the projects they've already worked on.
Excellent. Well, continuing the subject of water quality, you were mentioning before the show started ocean acidification being an issue. So tell me about what's going on with that.
Yeah, so we, and I think I've mentioned this on the show before, but I filed a bill around ocean acidification last session, and that bill passed through the House and the Senate and was signed into law. And so this piece of legislation, I mean, essentially our oceans are rapidly acidifying because the oceans serve as an absorber of carbon. So when carbon gets emitted into the ocean, around 25% of, or when carbon gets emitted to the atmosphere, around 25% of it gets absorbed by the ocean. And that makes our oceans more acidic. And if our oceans become too acidic, that has a whole host of implications on marine life. One of the largest for us economically is that it can prevent shellfish from forming their shells. And we have a massive shellfishing industry on the Cape and Islands, a really large one here in Falmouth in particular. And so this bill, which was set up to have a commission of stakeholders and scientists and folks from the shellfishing industry and legislators from all over the Massachusetts coast to come together and come up with a plan to address this issue and come up with a plan to mitigate ocean acidification. And so that bill passed, which is really exciting. It's the first time that we've seen in Massachusetts history that a bill on ocean acidification is passed. And this is something we really need to be proactive on because we've seen already the impacts of it on our local shellfishing industry. So was thrilled to be able to get that done in the first term.
Great, well, good work with that. Switching gears a little bit, affordable housing. You're talking about trying to find some money for that. So let's define affordable housing for folks because it's kind of an ambiguous term and it means different things to different people sometimes. And you said you were working on a bill having to do with this.
So in the bill that I put forward, we defined affordable housing as incomes under 175% of AMI, average median income. And so, when folks think about, and so we wanted to make sure, because Falmouth is such a high cost area and the Cape and Islands generally are such high cost areas, if you make if you're making even 10% above the area median income, it's still profoundly unaffordable to buy a home here, especially because in Falmouth, home prices, I don't have the exact number, but on average are probably over $500,000. When you look at the Vineyard in the district, their home price is hovering around $1 million on average. Nantucket, it's actually over $2 million average home price. And so in the Cape wide, this is a huge issue where we are people looking to buy a home here, people looking to stay in homes here are competing with an international housing market because this is such a desirable place to live that folks from not only all over Massachusetts, but all over the country and all over the world are looking to buy summer homes on the Cape and Islands. And so a local kid, who works in government and grew up here really struggles to afford a home here, along with a whole host of other kind of young working families that want to be able to who grew up here or who moved here for work and want to be able to find a home here. And also, there's a lot of seniors that are paying really high property taxes and might want to downgrade to a smaller apartment. They're really struggling to find a place to live too. And so what this bill does, taking into consideration the fact that there are very wealthy people driving up the housing market and buying really expensive homes, what this bill does is it says that any home sale over $1 million, the local community can put a tax of up to 2%, a transfer fee of up to 2% on that home sale. And that fee only applies to the amount of money over $1 million. So a $2 million home, if you had a 1% transaction fee, means that that person who's coming in and buying a $2 million home would be paying $10,000 to go to a local community affordable housing bank. And this would be a way for local communities like Falmouth to be able to really solve their affordable housing issues on their own terms through generating local revenue that would stay in the local community. It would not go back to the state. All of it would just stay in the local community. And so someone buying a $2 million home here, can more than afford to spend $10,000 to go to an affordable housing bank to support those who work here and really struggle to find a home. And we've seen the extremes of this just in the district when folks aren't also building affordable housing while really wealthy homeowners are buying homes. And over on Nantucket, their average home price is $2.4 million, and so that's profoundly unaffordable. And Falmouth, although we're not even close to that yet, is really moving in that direction. And it's an incredibly desirable place to live because it's such a beautiful community. And so we want to make sure that the people who service this community, the people who work here, the firefighters, the police officers, the teachers, you name it, the folks working at the scientific institutions down in Woods Hole, are able to live in the place that they work, and this would create a housing bank paid for by the wealthiest of the wealthy to support affordable housing for everyone else in the community.
Was there any pushback on this concept and this idea? I mean, imagine, all these very wealthy people, even if they can't afford it, probably would argue against something like that. So what were some of the arguments opposing this?
We haven't had any pushback from wealthy folks. And in fact, we've been pushing this on Nantucket for a number of years, and as a Nantucket specific issue. And the bill I filed now is a statewide bill, so all 351 cities and towns in the entire state would be able to implement this if they choose to. Again, it's a local option. The town would only put it forward if they voted for it at town meeting to do so. And so in Nantucket, there's a whole host of wealthy people living there, right? No one has pushed back against this. The wealthiest people who come in to buy homes in our community understand that they need people to service their homes. They need the landscapers. They want to go to a restaurant where people are, or waiters and waitresses and cooks can actually be there to work because they can afford to live in the local community. So, the wealthiest people buying these homes get it, and have actually been incredibly supportive. The opposition to it has only come from the Realtors Association, who just blindly oppose any sort of transfer fee, no matter how modest it is and how common sense it is. And at the end of the day, the largest issue impacting the realtor community here is the lack of housing production. And what this bill does is it allows for a housing bank to create more affordable housing and create housing production. So I'm not entirely sure why they're opposed to it, other than just being kind of blindly opposed to any sort of transfer fee. And also, when you think about creating affordable housing on your own terms, that's what this is all about. It's all about community control and allowing the community to create affordable housing on their terms. And there's been a lot of, I don't know if acrimony is the right word, but it's been a contentious issue in this town around some of the larger 40B projects. And and Falmouth is susceptible to large-scale 40B projects because they're not at 10%, the 10% affordable number. This would allow the local town to make investments in affordable housing on their own terms to be able to reach that 10% number and not be subjected to aggressive 40B developments.
Interesting. So circling back to our first subject of the elections,
yeah,
and with that goes hand in hand with voting and voter turnout, and we're talking more about young people voting these days because they have a voice and they're voting in higher numbers now. So you want to talk a little bit about teen voting?
Yeah, so this is an interesting issue that we've been working on, and this comes after really a concerted effort by the legislature to get more young people involved in the political process and really improve civics education and civics engagement. So last session, we passed a civics bill making it mandatory that in middle school and high school, students are being taught civics, basic information about government, about getting involved in the political process, and there's even a project component about kind of getting out in the local community and becoming involved with the government organization or something like just getting people more aware of how government works and how they can get involved and how they can create change in their own communities and statewide. And that's a really important piece because there is a massive lack of understanding in this state and also this country on what government does and how it works. And I've been asked numerous times how my commute is to Washington, D.C. And I've had to tell people I'm not that. That's a different rep. I represent 40,000 people here on the Cape Islands, and then I go vote in Boston. And so, there's just a lot. And I think, we are at an all-time high in this country in distrust in government. And a large component of that is because folks just don't know what the political process is and don't understand, how they can affect change. And so we passed this bill, which is really important in terms of strengthening our democracy. And then to build on that, Andy Vargas, who's a representative up in Haverhill, Massachusetts, another millennial, and I filed a bill that would allow cities and towns to allow folks 16 and 17 to be able to vote in local municipal elections.
Interesting.
So it would, if Falmouth choose to, if this passed, and then if Falmouth choose to do it, it would allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in the local town election. And the thought on this is this builds on our civic engagement piece. Because it doesn't automatically say they can vote, this is another tool to get teenagers to organize in local communities and organize and kind of advocate for their right to vote in their local community that they're in. So it's a way to get more young people involved in the process. And then once, when and if they're granted the right to vote in their local community, then they're really weighing in on issues that impact their daily lives. Like they're voting for, school committee members, right? They're voting for school budgets. They're voting on a number of local issues in the towns that they live in. But again, a local option if communities decide to do it. But I think it's really important to, empower and engage young people in democracy early on.
And I think that's fantastic because it's always the local municipalities that affect people's lives day to day.
Yeah.
The stop signs, your DPW, water mains, stuff like that. And empowering them at an early age, I think that's fantastic. That's a wonderful idea.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can get it through.
Yes. Well, Representative Fernandes, we won't call you congressman yet,
Yeah,
but who knows,
just the rep.
maybe in
No,
the future.
That's the rep for now. Yeah.
It's great having you on here. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
I would just say, like always, folks, reach out to me anytime. My office number is 617-722-2430. Maybe we can do the little ticker thing. And email is just dylan.fernandez@mahouse.gov. Would love to hear from you. If there's any issue impacting your lives, please reach out about how I and my office can be of service to you. We very often work on a number of constituent cases related to getting people onto health insurance, getting people unemployment assistance, a whole host of issues. So please reach out anytime, and it's an honor to serve you, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Well, Dylan, it's always been a pleasure.
It's great.
We'll have
Thanks,
you on
Jeff.
again. And,
this is fast, man.
Yeah, bullet points. We were just going from one to the other. So we'll have you on again, at an appropriate time to give us another legislative update.
Anytime.
Excellent.
Great.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
All right.